You're listening to Bottomshelf Bitcoin. This is episode 15.
Relax. Enjoy your coffee. Okay. Good morning, everyone. Take a chill pill. What is it? Okay.
All right, everybody, welcome back to another episode of Bottomshelf Bitcoin, the podcast that puts Bitcoin knowledge within everyone's reach. As always, I'm your host, Josh Humphrey. Today, we are going to be going over both some Bitcoin history and discussing something that may be on the horizon as well. My guest today is Lyn Ulbricht, mother of Ross Ulbricht, who started the Silk Road, one of the first Bitcoin markets. Eventually, the government stepped in and shut down the Silk Road, but I'm going to let Lyn actually tell that story because she's going to do a much better job than I am, and there's a lot more to it than just that. So, Lyn, welcome to the show.
Oh, thank you. Glad to be here.
So, just for our audience, because some people may be longtime Bitcoiners and some people may be relatively new, the short version, just so they kind of have an idea of where this is going, and correct me if I if I missay any of this, but the short version is, the Silk Road basically was created by Ross. It allowed users to buy and sell non-violent, non-harmful goods and services for Bitcoin, including but not limited to drugs. And then at some point, the government stepped in, not only shut down the site, but also arrested Ross, and through a pretty awful series of missteps in the justice and legal system, Ross was sentenced to double life. Yeah,
well, that's pretty much it. The site was created not as a drug site, but as a site that protected the privacy of its users. And there were things that were prohibited that created victims or were involuntary or used force. So, for example, child pornography was not allowed. Weapons were not sold, stolen property, that sort of thing. But drugs were considered a choice, and they were allowed. But there were a lot of other things on the site. You wouldn't know it from the media, but I mean, there was raw milk and books and art and gold and keychains, and there's a whole bunch of things that were on there. Also, now granted, the biggest product by far was marijuana, small quantities of user amounts of marijuana, average sale $40. So there was, if you want to classify marijuana in there, that was the biggest by far product. But it wasn't presented, it was barely mentioned at trial that even marijuana was on Silk Road. They never mentioned any of the legal things or the more, they basically focused on drugs the whole time.
Sure.
And so you'd never know from the trial or the media that it was much more of a diverse site. It was really it was vendor and buyer driven. So what people within those limitations I mentioned wanted to buy and sell and using Bitcoin. So it was really the first proof of use of Bitcoin that I know of. Certainly the biggest.
Yeah. So I got into Bitcoin, or I first heard about Bitcoin kind of around the time that all of this happened. And even my friend who was telling me about it kind of, now I know his feelings on the drug war and things like that. So I don't think this was his intention, but in the interest of brevity, he just kind of said, oh yeah, it was a site where, kind of the big thing was drugs and they shut it down. So even among that community, sometimes that was the reputation.
Oh yeah, well that was the main thing, especially if you factor in marijuana.
Right, right.
It was anonymous, and so obviously it would attract sales for people who were selling things that they could be arrested for.
Sure. Give us a little bit of kind of Ross's background and how, I guess his experience with computers or things like that, of how he got into all this.
Well, Ross is not a programmer, despite what you might read. He's never been a programmer. He's not very versed in programming languages. He was a physics major and Then he got his master for a bachelor's degree, and then he got his master's in material science, which is basically physics and chemistry and that kind of thing that's applied to materials. So he isn't a programmer. Ross was very interested in freedom and free markets and Austrian economics, and he worked on the Ron Paul campaign, and he just became on fire for freedom and wanted to spread the word of free markets to people. And to that end, he created a video game that he almost got published, where people would be playing. It was based on Austrian economics, so when people playing the game, they would actually experience what that was. And it didn't get published, and so he created a platform that was on the internet to the same end. That's what he was interested in, and but he didn't, have advanced computer skills or anything like that, which begs the question: was one person who had limited computer skills actually running this supposed multi-million dollar, they say billion, it wasn't a billion, even the government doesn't say a billion, but multi-million dollar enterprise from a cafe on his laptop? It's kind of hard to believe.
Yeah, I didn't know that about the video game thing. That's really interesting.
Mm-hmm.
Man, that sounds like that would have been
would have been a good game. He might not have done this, and he wouldn't be in prison right now.
Yeah. So, kind of, if you will, kind of walk us through, I guess, the events that led up to or surrounding the shutdown and Ross's arrest.
That's the whole investigation. There's going to be actually, we're working on a whole thing showing what exactly that, but it's very long and footnoted and complicated because it was really a multi-agency effort, and they were competing with each other, and there was corruption involved, and there was all kinds of things going on leading up to Ross's arrest, including pursuing another person who the person in charge of the investigation thought was Dread Pirate Roberts, not Ross. And so there's questions about that as well. So it's a pretty big question, all the things leading up to his arrest. But it will be on our website. We're going to put up a case history that's very detailed and a lot of things that people don't know.
Okay, and so that's freeross.org.
Yes.
Correct. Okay. And so can you give me kind of like a time frame, because I'm trying to remember what were the kind of years?
Mm-hmm. And also, just FYI, on freeross.org, there's a timeline, which is helpful. But Ross was arrested in October of 2013.
Okay.
And and they shut down the site at that time. Interestingly, 7 weeks later, Dread Pirate Roberts logged into the Silk Road Forum from his account. So I'm very curious to know who that was, since Ross was in solitary confinement. But there's a lot of weird questions about this whole case that have been either hidden, suppressed, sealed, undisclosed, encrypted. I mean, there's all kinds of things that have not come out. That is quite frustrating, really, because I know there's a whole lot more to this story. So that's when Ross was arrested, and his trial was in 2015, and his sentence was in 2015, and he was in jail. He's been in jail for almost 5 years.
Wow. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And so, and then in between those times, my understanding is it's come out that several, if not many, of the agents and agencies involved, there's been a lot of corruption charges brought up, and it seems like every time I turn around, they're bringing out some new, I'm finding out they're publishing something new that like something involved in the process was not correct.
Oh yeah, I mean there are many violations in the opinion of the defense, and there were 2 corrupt agents that are now in prison who were the jury wasn't permitted by the judge to know about. She wouldn't have let the jury know about these corrupt agents who were investigating Silk Road and had the run of the site, could change things. They had the ability to act as Dread Pirate Roberts. They had the ability to do all kinds of things, change chats, delete things. And that, that's another thing that was discovered after trial, is that someone with access deleted big portions of evidence, because what was discovered after trial was a more complete document and file of the same thing, and it showed that it was deleted. So there was tampering, and we don't know how much was deleted. We don't know what it even said, but it was tampered with. So and so these two corrupt agents are in prison now, and the jury couldn't even know that they existed.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
Whereas in another court, by the way, the biggest meth dealer on Silk Road was in another district. He was in the Ninth Circuit, and that judge cut his sentence in half because of the involvement of these corrupt agents. Whereas in New York, where Ross was dragged to from California, where he's arrested, he had no connection to New York at all, except that Chuck Schumer was behind the whole thing and wanted him there, I guess. They, didn't even allow the jury to hear it.
What grounds did they use then? I guess I'm confused about, it sounds like you are as well, but this, bringing him to New York, did they give a reason for justifying that?
Well, they said, it was the internet, so it can be anywhere. And when the Southern District of New York wants you, what I've been told is they get you. They're just known as, one lawyer called them the second New York Mafia. Let's just put it that way.
Wow. Okay. Jeez.
They're tough and ruthless and vicious, really.
Now, what was the actual conviction? I mean, what was the
again listed on our website? But it's let me think. And it's different because they dropped some of it for the sentencing. But it was basically trafficking in narcotics, and then they put the kingpin charge on him, saying that a website host is the same as El Chapo or Pablo Escobar, and calling him a kingpin. And the kingpin alone has a life sentence and implies violence, even though Ross's charges were all nonviolent.
Right.
He's nonviolent. And then there was there was stuff like conspiracy to hack, even not because he hacked into anything, but because some people sold software on the site that could be used to hack. Money laundering, they always have that. And false IDs, because I guess somebody sold false IDs on Silk Road, so they charged him with conspiracy. It's like saying Jeff Bezos is in a conspiracy with everybody who buys and sells on Amazon. Or, eBay is in a conspiracy with, yeah.
Yeah, that's exactly what I was thinking. How many not scammy, but, things that we see on Amazon that's like, that's kind of a knockoff, but you never see Jeff Bezos get arrested or,
Yeah. Well, and Facebook has murders on it.
Right.
And there's all kinds of drugs being sold on there, I've been told. I don't really know. And same with Craigslist. My goodness, Craigslist, people have died. There's all kinds of scams on Craigslist. Tons.
Yeah. So it's a very inconsistent
very
enforcement of this view that a website manager or host or whatever is responsible for everything that happens on that domain. Oh man.
Exactly.
So, and then in March, you guys had the defense before the Supreme Court, or let's see, hang on.
No. Let's see what. I'm not sure what you're talking about in March, but what happened? Well, you mean this past March? Is that what you're thinking?
Yeah, I had the timeline pulled up.
Okay, what happened was in December. Well, first Ross's attorneys appealed the trial and the conviction and the sentence in the Second Circuit, and that was October of 16, I guess. God, I needed to pull up the timeline myself. And then, actually, I have it up and I'm not reading it. And they shot it down. Again, well, I won't make any comments. It's just they shot it down.
Yeah.
And then Ross's team, a new lawyer, petitioned the Supreme Court. And that happened in December, this past December. And then 21 organizations supported the petition in 5 what's called an amicus brief. Well, 5 amicus briefs, which means friends of the court, which is when other people step up to support a petition saying this is important. And so that was in January. And then we just found out in March that that's what you're talking about, March. Everything blends together for me, I tell you.
Yeah, sure.
That they did not reject the petition, which is great news.
Yeah.
Because they could have just rejected it and then we would be really out of options. But they didn't. And so it looks like, they're holding it for another Fourth Amendment case, which is Carpenter versus U.S. And depending on how they rule on Carpenter will affect how Ross's case goes.
Okay. And so now, I mean, obviously this has huge implications personally for you and your family. And I just can't even imagine the position that you guys are in. But, I think sometimes people have a hard time feeling like something is important if it doesn't affect them directly. But what, this has Fourth Amendment implications for everyone and other things as well.
Yeah, there is. There's a page on our website, a precedents page, showing why you should care about this case for yourself, not just for Ross. And it talks about the different precedents that are being set here. There's a huge privacy question, which is before the Supreme Court, which is saying, does the government have the right to search and seize an individual's internet browsing activity without a warrant, without probable cause, meaning a good reason that they have to present to a court, and without any oversight? They just can do it. You don't know they're doing it. They're just doing it. And right now that they can do that. And part of Ross's petition is challenging that and saying this needs to be changed because they should at least have to get a warrant, which isn't that hard. They can get warrants. I mean, it's not,
right.
But they don't even want to do that because I suppose they'd have to be out in the open. So, and the thing is, the implication is not just, okay, they're going to check out my browsing habits and they'll be really bored and whatever, or they'll say, oh, she's a weirdo because she's involved in Lyn Ulbricht's case or whatever. But,
right.
But they can also use it to see what politicians are doing online, what judges are doing online, and maybe they were doing stuff they don't want people to know, and maybe they could use it to blackmail them, or they can see what different political groups people are involved in. Maybe they want to persecute those people for some reason, or the person in power at the time does. This is all very troubling. I mean, this is, not good. They should at least have to have a warrant. And so that's one of the questions that's at stake, and it affects us all. There's a First Amendment question of free speech because the judge used Ross's political philosophy, which is basically libertarian, to enhance his sentence. She even said, I know you started this for philosophical reasons, and I don't know that you've given that up. So basically she's saying, well, I just gotta have to put you in a cage for life because you're a libertarian. Yeah,
I had seen that, and I just, I can't even understand how, I guess because she's the judge in that room, there's no authority higher than her, but I can't understand how even an appeals wouldn't at least consider that.
I know, and they didn't seem to care about that. Because once they denied the appeal, our lawyer went back with that one of those issues, and apparently they're not concerned. Another thing that's one of the Supreme Court petitions is, does a judge violate the Sixth Amendment of right to a jury trial by taking an uncharged crime that the jury never ruled on or was not even presented with in any formal way with with proof and all of that, to enhance a very excessive sentence, which is exactly what she did with the murder for hire allegations, which were never brought to trial, never proven, dropped by the government, and yet she referenced them and justified, among other things, other unproven things, justified her sentence with them. This is a violation of the Sixth Amendment, because the reason the founders wrote the Sixth Amendment, partially, was to protect the accused from this kind of judicial overreach and give the accused a decision by 12 of who were supposed to be his peers, and rather than one person. And that's kind of up for grabs too in this case. And it's been happening a lot through the decades, apparently. The judges just do this. Someone can even be acquitted at trial and they'll still grab it and use it against them. In Ross's case, it wasn't even charged. And then there's all the implications of the drug war, which we can go into. But the drug war, is not about stopping drug use, obviously.
Correct.
Or else they would have figured out something that actually worked. So it's, there's the whole drug war aspect of it. The excessive sentencing, which is going on in this country at an alarming rate. Life sentences have quintupled since the 80s.
Wow.
When I was a kid, hardly anybody got a life sentence. You had to be like a mass murdering maniac to be put away for life.
Right.
And now, a friend and fellow inmate of Ross, where he is now, is in there for life for selling marijuana.
Wow.
And the federal prison is in Colorado, where it's legal. And this guy, Tony, is serving life for marijuana.
That's just unthinkable.
It is. He's not the only one. I know of other just strictly pot people who are serving life. I've just signed 2 petitions because it's so, it's so evil and so horrible. And it's not only for drugs. A lot of the excessive sentences are for drugs. But I read about a guy who got 130 years for stealing tires.
Tires?
Yes, tires. I couldn't believe it when I read it. I was like, some of these judges are out of control.
Absolutely.
Terrible.
Yeah.
And, but the whole system makes a lot of money, and they also gain a lot of power. And it's a huge jobs program, the whole prison industrial complex. Where I live, I moved to Colorado to be near Ross.
Sure.
There's like 11 prisons. They're all, most everybody in this town I live in and the surrounding towns work for the prison.
Wow.
Yeah, it's a huge employer. And then there's the precedent that you touched on about who's responsible. Is it a website host? Is it a person using it? And they've come up with this legal theory called vicarious liability, meaning you maybe didn't do it, but you're responsible for what somebody else does. And the government actually criminally indicted Federal Express for transporting unknowingly, I believe, illegal pharmaceuticals. And, someone may use FedEx to send them. And they criminally indicted Federal Express for drug trafficking and money laundering. And they eventually dropped it because, FedEx has deep pockets and
sure
teams of lawyers. And they, it's like, no, that's another precedent, though, that website hosts really should pay attention to because, sometimes you don't even know what's on your site.
Right.
The judge, grabbed comments that she didn't say Ross wrote. She just said they were on the site and used them at sentencing to give him the sentence.
Man, it's so frustrating to hear. And I know it has to be just beyond enraging for you. And it has to be difficult to even restate it because, man, I think of it and it just makes me angry. The abuse of power and the, using just things that are unrelated to try and sway, a jury or whatever. I guess was there a jury at all?
Yeah, no, there's a jury,
okay.
Although 98% of people do not go to trial. They're bullied and pressured into pleading and told if they go to trial, they're going to lose, which they probably will, and that they'll get a worse repercussions. They'll get a worse sentence. So they usually plead. It's not a good. We're losing jury trials, which is a bulwark of our justice system.
Yeah, absolutely.
And, we might as well why don't we just skip the whole thing then? Why are we doing this charade? Why don't, the prosecutors just say what's supposed to happen and they run the place anyway?
Yeah.
And another precedent that was set is the digital evidence. It was like 98% at least digital evidence in Ross's trial. It was all digital, which I've been told by computer experts over and over again how vulnerable that is to tampering, to deleting, as we learned later that some evidence was deleted, planting, and you can't tell. There's no way to forensically tell if digital evidence has been tampered with. There's no fingerprints. You just don't know.
Right.
The only reason we knew this other one was tampered with is that it was discovered there was this other file that was complete. And so it was obvious that a big portion of it had been deleted. But that's the only reason we knew it even happened.
Yeah. So who knows how much other stuff went on?
Exactly. Yes, that's exactly right. There's no way to know.
Man. And so how much did Bitcoin come up in the trial?
It came up quite a bit. The government brought a witness, last-minute witness, who actually, just as a side note, they paid $55,000 to come and testify. And I'm like, oh, gee, that must be nice to have all that money so that you can do this. And the defense called a counter Bitcoin witness, Andreas Antonopoulos, who you probably have heard of.
Yeah.
And he was ready to challenge the government's, statements. They weren't correct. It's not how Bitcoin worked. It was very distorted. And he was not permitted to testify as a defense witness. So last minute, he was just told, don't get on that plane. You're not going to be allowed to take the stand, because there were various reasons that the judge gave. Anyway, the bottom line was that he didn't get to testify, so that there was no defense with the Bitcoin question. What
a travesty. Andreas, he's so knowledgeable, and this is kind of going off on a side thing, but he's so knowledgeable, and he does such a good job of explaining things in a way that I only wish I could explain. He's got 3+ books now out explaining on both an easy level and on a developer level as well. So, man, that's just what a
big
misstep to not be allowed. Yeah.
Right. And so that was the whole trial. Was one thing like that after another. It was awful. It was just really awful. So I just hope we can get another one.
Yeah.
I hope we can get a fair trial this time, and with all the evidence and everything, so it's not just this circus.
Right. Well, and it even beyond just this case. There are, like you said, so many precedents that are on the line here that I think everyone needs to be aware, and everyone who's going to be using a computer or cares about the justice system needs to be aware of this case and needs to be doing what we can to support you guys. So what can people do to get involved, to help, to support, spread the word?
Well, our hub is FreeRossorg, so there's a lot of stuff on there. There's a take action page that's different suggestions and ways to help. Of course, we always need donations. There's ways to do that. If you buy on Amazon through our site, we get a little, and it doesn't cost anything to you. We get a little commission off that. And there's different ways. Like there's an art game based on a drawing Ross did that for $1 you can help reveal the drawing. And there's tax deductible option. There's just different, and we have a store, so you could buy things in the store. So that's, monetary, because it's very expensive to do what we're doing. It's
absolutely
crazy expensive. And that's, the government has all the money. There's no problem. They have it or they print it or whatever.
Yeah.
But, that's one way they crush people. And there's a lot of people who are languishing in the prisons because they couldn't get good representation. So there's that. But there's also ways, follow us on, Twitter and like our page. We have a Free Ross Community Facebook page, and, social media, Instagram's Free Ross Ulbricht. And that's really helpful. And just to spread the word about the narrative, what's really going on here, because I guess it's kind of old news now. I mean, it was 4 years ago. And that's one of the things that I fear is that, people just forget Ross and he'll just be like with so many people, just warehoused forever in this place. And by the way, it's a very violent place. It's not, it's a maximum security prison they have him in, even though he never was convicted or accused of being violent in any way. And he's in there with violent gangs and violent people. And because of his sentence. Because if you have a life sentence, you're automatically in there. That's why his friend Tony for the marijuana is in there too, even though they're not violent. And there's, so that's a whole other issue. But so just if they go to freeross.org and spread the word, and there's lots of ways to help. And also, if anybody has any political connections, any kind of high-level connections at all, please let me know. You can contact me. There's a contact page, or there's a contact option on our footer, and I'll answer. But it would be really helpful. I think this is a political case, and we need to have some kind of political, help. I think would be helpful. So
yeah. Take anything that anybody out there can help with, and make those connections. That's kind of the whole point of this networking thing. All of those, I'll put links to all of those things in the show notes for today, bottomshelfbitcoin.com/15. And then I was looking on the website. You can also write to Ross as well. Is that correct?
Yeah. Mm-hmm. You can write him a letter. He doesn't, although all the other inmates have email, including gang leaders who have national networks, they have email, but they won't let Ross have email. So, because I guess they don't really understand him, and they think he can do anything. I don't know what they think. I don't know. I honestly don't. It's like insane. It's, he can't. So he doesn't have email. He's deprived of that, but he can get letters.
Okay.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, it'd be nice. Then he knows he's not being forgotten, that he's not alone.
Absolutely.
It's tough.
I imagine so.
And that's one reason I moved. I wanted to make sure he had a lifeline to the normal world, and friends visit and other family, but, I'm there filling in and always there week after week unless somebody else is able to go.
Gotcha.
So, yeah, because so many guys in there don't have visitors. I mean, it's so sad. They're, and of course they're moved far from their families, and, not too many people are able to pick up and move like I've done, because we have an internet business.
Gotcha.
But, it's a sad state. What we're doing in this country with mass incarceration is terrible. It's really bad.
Yeah. And so is there no consideration given on cases like this to keep people anywhere close to where they are originally from?
I think supposedly, but I talk to people all the time that are their loved one is moved all over the place. So I'm not sure how effective it is. I think they're supposed to do that, but it doesn't seem like they do that I can see.
Yeah.
Because people are traveling really far, and they, it takes sometimes years between visits. I mean, it's difficult.
Wow.
Expensive, so.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and then they move the prisoners too. They'll move them around, and I don't think they always keep them. I don't know. It's really hard to figure out the reasoning. I've come to my saying in the prison is why ask why, because people go, why do they do that, and why? I'm like, why ask why? There is no why. There is no rational explanation. I can't give it to you. So.
Gotcha. Yeah, it is. Yeah, it's frustrating. Let me ask you. I'm gonna kind of play a foil or devil's advocate here, because not too many years ago, I would say probably around that same time where I first heard about Bitcoin and started getting into Bitcoin was before I really kind of discovered libertarianism and things like that. And so, I think for a lot of people who may be of, let's say, a conservative background, like me, or like kind of the area that I live in, people may say, okay, well, it's excessive sentencing, but, they still have big issues with drugs, and they don't get maybe the frustration or all the problems with the drug war and the way that all of this goes on. And just say, well, that's what you get when you mess with drugs or something like that. I mean, I want to give you kind of a chance to respond to that and how far it's taken over that. Yeah.
Well, first of all, I'm not really defending Silk Road or many of the things people chose to sell on Silk Road. I think it's a bad idea. I don't advocate drugs. I think people should not do drugs.
I'm in the same boat. I actually work in a hospital. And I don't think you should. I think it's you're messing up your own life. I just also don't think it's necessarily my place to use force to stop you from doing it.
That's the question. The other thing is, I don't think people should smoke cigarettes. I hate seeing cigarettes because I think it's really, really unhealthy. And, we all know that. I also don't think people should drink too much because I've seen the ravages of alcoholism. And I know someone whose brother died of just alcohol poisoning from drinking so much. So people shouldn't drink too much either. People shouldn't do a lot of things.
Sure.
But the thing is, there is the question, where is the authority coming from for the federal government to tell you what you can or cannot do with your own body, as long as you're not hurting someone else? And there really is no authority. The Constitution has nothing about it. When they made alcohol illegal, they did pass the 13th. I forget which amendment now. They passed an amendment to the Constitution, making it illegal. And then they had to pass, I think it was the 21st Amendment to repeal prohibition.
The 21st was repeal, yeah.
To repeal it. And they haven't done that with drugs. They just decided and gave themselves the authority. And now they use it to, put people in prison. Now, the drug war doesn't work. It's been going on for over 45 years. We've spent over $1 trillion with a T, dollars in taxpayer money, and people are still doing drugs. It has not worked at all. So just from the practical standpoint, and then we're putting people in prisons that is extremely expensive. It's like the most expensive and most evil hotel in the world. It's like the worst. And this is all taxpayer money. And so that's something to consider. How about not continuing to do something that doesn't work? But the other part of the drug war, it's not really about drugs. That's the thing. If it were, they would do something that worked. But it does expand government power. They're able to trample on constitutional protections that have precedents that spread out way past drugs. And they make a lot of money. And I believe as conservatives will agree that that's not good. That's not right. I mean, most conservatives are not for big, intrusive government. And the drug war is enabling the government to get bigger and more intrusive. That's not to say that. And the other thing about the drug war, and I've kind of learned this from the prison, is that it actually causes the violence, because these violent gangs, it's all about their turf and having the drugs and having it's all drug oriented. Well, that's because the price of drugs is artificially high because it's illegal. If it were legal and regulated or whatever, it wouldn't be expensive. It would be like coffee or flour or alcohol or cigarettes or some of the other, things. And there wouldn't be any of this violence. You don't see Smirnoff and Absolute going to war in the streets over their vodka.
No.
So, there's a lot.
And to speak to that, I mean, during the time of Prohibition was the rise of organized crime in America.
Exactly. That's right. And now they have the cartels. The cartels wouldn't exist and be doing the horrible things they do if it weren't for the drug war, because drugs, there wouldn't be any profit in it. There wouldn't be enough profit in it. And this is happening in Portugal. And actually a Portuguese guy that my husband met was telling him that, for drugs, the drug thing was getting really bad in Portugal. It was dangerous. There was a lot of crime. And once they made it legal, he said it's completely cleaned up. He said it's great. It's gone back to being wholesome, and it's pretty miraculous what's going on in Portugal and probably other places, but he was Portuguese. And it's kind of counterintuitive, but if you just look at the results, you can see what works and what doesn't.
Yeah. Well, and at the very least, I know we're kind of getting off of your specific case and not really on Bitcoin either. This is just a constitutional thing. But at the very least, they could kick it back to the individual states and let the individual states,
that's right,
give it a shot.
Well,
and decide
what they're kind of doing anyway, aren't they? But
that's true.
But yes, that's what our country is supposed to be, is a federalist system where the states have, it's not the federal government. The federal government's supposed to have very limited powers. But they have a lot of power now. They pretty much run the place. And I don't even know why there's a federal criminal justice system at all. I really don't know. I have to look into the history of when all that happened. But what's the point? We have states. Why are they involved?
Yeah.
It's not. It's
a good
about
question.
Power and money. It's not about trying to stop drugs.
Absolutely.
In fact, if the drug war stopped, if people stopped taking drugs, they'd be really upset because they would, all these people would be unemployed and they wouldn't be making all the money they make with civil asset forfeiture and all that stuff.
Yeah. Well, that's a whole nother topic we could go into.
Which is about the drug war too.
Well, yes.
Yeah.
Well, all right. Well, I don't want to take up too much of your time tonight, but again, freeross.org. And I'll have links to various parts of that website because, like she says, it is a very thorough website. I've kind of been looking through it, and normally I put several different links to different articles and things, but I think I may just do links to just that and some of your social media stuff as well because it seems to be thorough enough. And then
it's dense. It's very dense. And it's about to get more dense. But it's a very complicated case. So people can go deeply into it as they want. Yeah. And
then there's also the dark web movie, correct? Or
deep web,
excuse me.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So I haven't watched that myself yet, but I've been meaning to.
You should watch it. Mm-hmm.
Okay.
It's good. It's good. And it's very engaging. It's not boring at all. It's very interesting.
Okay. Well, if it's got your stamp of approval, then I'll go check it out.
Yeah. It only goes up to the trial.
Okay.
As far as Ross is concerned, so it leaves a lot out, because a lot happened after. But it's very good, and it's not only about Ross. I mean, it's about the whole deep web. So.
Gotcha. Okay. Mm-hmm. Well, guys, y'all go check out freeross.org. Follow everything on Twitter at FreeRoss. And again, I'll put the links.
It's free_Ross at Twitter.
Free_Ross. Excuse me. Thank you for correcting me there. I would not want to send them.
There's another guy named Ross who has that. He wouldn't let me have it.
Okay. So free_Ross on Twitter. And if you need other links, bottomshelfbitcoin.com/15. Anything else you want to say before we go, Lyn?
No, we've covered a lot. I think people just really need to realize that it's very important to pay attention to these things because I think our freedom's on the line. I think we're in a very pivotal time in history, and I think we need to pay attention or we might just slide on down to not a very free country, and I don't think we want that. No. All right. Well, thank you so much for your time. I really appreciate it. Sure. You're welcome. All right. Okay, everyone, that's going to do it for this week's episode. Now, this is normally the part where I plug all my stuff and I encourage you to support the show, but you guys know how to do all that by now. This week, I'm going to skip that part and I'm just going to ask you to go support the Ulbrichts somehow. I'm going to put all the links to the different parts of their site on the show notes page at bottomshelfbitcoin.com/15. And I'm telling you, I'm not really even asking you. I'm really kind of telling you to go look at those. Go read through the site.
look through the timeline, look through the politics, all these things that are involved. Understand that this does affect all of us. Even if you're not really a Bitcoin person or whatever, like Supreme Court issues, the precedents that this sets, all of these things are important. They should be important to you. They affect all of us, or potentially will affect all of us. So go support this cause. Go buy something from their gift shop, donate directly. You can use Bitcoin, you can use various altcoins. I think they've even got either Changely or Shapeshift integration. So even if you have some kind of altcoin that's not supported, you can use Shapeshift integration or Changely. I don't remember. Go to the site, you can see which one it is. So donate directly, buy something from the shop, spread the word. If you know anybody that's got some political pull or something along those lines, use that, spread the word. If you've got any kind of real social media influence, or just maybe you know someone that does, talk to them, or send Ross a letter. Actually, I'm going to ask everybody to send Ross a letter. I am challenging myself as well to send Ross a letter. Let him know he's not forgotten. Let him know that you heard about his story and, you're thinking of him, you're praying for him, whatever. That's just, what a rough place. And bottom shelfers, let's make him feel like, there's still people out there who remember him, who know who he is, who are appreciative of kind of the groundwork that he laid. Whether or not you agree with the things that were sold on Silk Road, that it's just ridiculous that the way that the legal system treats people. So, like I said, this is bigger than me and you and this show. In some ways, it's bigger than Bitcoin, maybe. It's definitely more expansive in more areas of our life than just Bitcoin. And in a lot of ways, it's bigger than Ross. Like we said, this affects everyone. So go read up, find a way you can help, and then execute that plan. All right, you guys come back next week. I am going to be talking with Ansel and Jeff from the Bitcoin is Freedom show, and about kind of a related topic, opting out of the state's corrupt system. So we'll see you guys next week. For Bottom Shelf Bitcoin, I'm Josh Humphrey. Thanks for listening.